Hi, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. Today we're talking about something a lot of people feel but don't always say out loud, the quiet pressure to explain who you're becoming, especially when your growth confuses other people.
Yeah, it's funny how the moment you start changing, whether it's how you think, how you speak, how you show up in the world, people start asking questions. Not always kindly, either. Sometimes it sounds like, you've changed, as if that's a crime.
But here's the truth, you have changed. That's what people do. You're not supposed to be a carbon copy of who you were 5 years ago, or even last month. Growth isn't betrayal. It's natural.
And you don't owe anyone a detailed breakdown of why you no longer tolerate what you used to, or why your goals have shifted, or why you've become quieter, louder, softer, stronger. Sometimes the only explanation is, I'm evolving. That's it.
We all outgrow things. Friendships. Beliefs. Habits. Even parts of our own identity. And that doesn't mean the past was fake, it just means you're becoming more of who you really are now. And that deserves space, not suspicion.
And sometimes people aren't reacting to you changing, they're reacting to how your change reflects on what they haven't confronted in themselves. It's not always about you. And that's a strange kind of freedom, isn't it?
Absolutely. When someone says, you're different, maybe the answer is, good. Because it takes courage to evolve. To pause and ask, is this still me? And then to adjust, even if it disappoints the version of you others were more comfortable with.
It's so easy to feel like we have to justify every shift. Like we have to defend our peace, explain our silence, or validate why we've stopped chasing things we no longer want. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is just keep going quietly.
And people who truly care about you, who are growing themselves, won't demand a presentation every time you change. They'll give you the grace to evolve, to stretch, to soften or strengthen without needing a step-by-step report.
There's this unspoken pressure to stay consistent for the sake of being predictable. But what if growth looks inconsistent? What if healing makes you act in ways you wouldn't have before? That's not you being fake. That's you becoming real.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit most people forget. Real growth isn't always tidy. It doesn't follow a script. One day you might feel bold and certain, and the next you're unsure again. That's not regression, it's part of the process.
And just because you can't explain it yet doesn't mean it isn't valid. Some changes come with words, and some come with a quiet shift in energy. In how you carry yourself. In what you no longer tolerate. In what you start seeking instead.
There's something really empowering in deciding you don't have to shrink your change to make others comfortable. You can let your evolution be misunderstood. That's hard, but it's honest. You don't owe anyone a version of you that no longer fits.
And maybe, just maybe, you're not meant to be understood by everyone. Maybe part of growth is learning to be okay with that. To stop offering explanations like apologies. To stand in your new self, even when it's still unfamiliar. Even when it's still forming.
Because growth doesn't require permission. It requires honesty. And that honesty starts with you, choosing yourself without needing a round of applause. Letting your life shift without a press release. Trusting that who you're becoming is enough.
And the people who truly see you, who are growing too, they won't ask for a full explanation. They'll notice the subtle shifts, the calmer tone in your voice, the way you pause before saying yes, the way you protect your peace a little more fiercely.
They'll get it, even if they don't get all of it. And the ones who don't? Well, they don't need to. You're not here to convince anyone that your growth is justified. You're here to live it. Quietly. Proudly. Fully.
You're allowed to become softer without being seen as weak. Louder without being called dramatic. More private without being labeled distant. Whatever you're growing into, it's yours. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you.
And if you ever feel the pull to explain yourself just to make others more comfortable, maybe ask yourself, why? Is their understanding worth more than your peace? Is their approval more important than your becoming?
Because some of the most powerful growth happens in silence. When no one else sees the inner shift, but you do. When you choose to honor what's changing in you, even if it confuses the world around you. That's where evolution becomes freedom.
And when you start trusting that inner shift, without needing it to be loud or universally accepted, you begin to realize how much energy you've spent trying to stay explainable. To be palatable. To stay consistent for people who aren't even listening deeply.
Exactly. You start realizing you don't need to keep being the same version of yourself, just because someone else is still attached to it. You're not responsible for other people's nostalgia. You're responsible for your truth now.
And your truth might be quieter these days. Or bolder. Or softer in some places and sharper in others. That's all allowed. There's no single way to evolve. You can rewrite your story mid-chapter if you need to.
And you don't have to preface your piece with a disclaimer. You don't have to explain your boundaries before enforcing them. You don't have to justify why you're no longer over-explaining who you are. You can just be. That's the permission you've always had.
So if something inside you is changing, even if you can't yet name it, even if you feel it before you understand it, give it space. Let it breathe. Let it unfold without narrating every step. You're allowed to evolve quietly, radically, and without needing to explain why.
Sometimes the most sacred parts of who we're becoming don't need to be shared in real time. They need to be protected. Nurtured. Lived through. Not turned into a speech, not packaged for validation, just honored in private.
And you'll find that when you stop explaining yourself to people who were never really listening, you create more room for the people who do get it. The ones who notice without you needing to announce. Who feel your growth in how you show up, not in what you say.
There's peace in that. In not needing to defend your choices. In knowing your life doesn't have to be approved by a panel before it feels right. In walking away from the pressure to be understood and walking toward the freedom of simply being yourself.
And it's not about cutting everyone off or becoming cold, it's about choosing not to shrink. Not to pause your journey every time someone else gets confused by your direction. It's about trusting your inner compass, even when the map isn't public.
Because the truth is, you don't owe the world an explanation for your healing, your clarity, your softness, or your strength. You owe yourself the space to grow into all of it, at your own pace, in your own time, without a script.
And maybe the real strength is in staying rooted when others question you. In not rushing to soothe their discomfort with a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Let them think what they will, you're not here to make sense to everyone.
No, you're really not. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is not explain. To let your silence speak for the shifts happening within. Because not everything sacred needs to be spoken. Some changes are just for you.
And there's such dignity in that. In choosing presence over performance. In letting your life speak louder than your defense of it ever could. People might misunderstand you, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're not staying small.
Exactly. The people who need you to stay the same are often the ones most threatened by your growth. But you don't have to stay where they're comfortable. You're allowed to become someone new without checking if they're okay with it.
You don't have to perform your evolution. You don't have to give updates like status reports. You get to walk quietly into your new season. Not because you owe no one, but because you owe yourself the freedom to evolve without interruption.
So if you're in a season of change, of becoming, of soft detachment from who you used to be, remember this: your evolution doesn't need to be explained to be valid. It just needs to be lived.
Let your growth be real, even if it's quiet. Let it be yours, even if no one claps. And let it unfold without the pressure to translate it for people who were only ever comfortable with your old version.
You're allowed to outgrow your past. You're allowed to become unfamiliar to people who once knew you. And you're allowed to keep moving forward, even if you can't yet explain where you're going.
Thanks for listening to us today on the British Accent Podcast. We'll be back soon with more conversations that hold space for where you are and where you're headed.
Take your time. Trust your path. And remember, evolving is your right, not your burden.
Until next time, take care.